I still hear that voice on the worst nights. It was a game jam, and we were all just players on a board we couldn't see. How do you hunt a ghost that leaves fingerprints? The most terrifying part wasn't the threats. It was the familiarity. They put him in the ground, but the calls didn't stop. We had the right man. We had to have the right man. What if the truth was a shadow we created ourselves? The first tape arrived at the Brookhaven County Sheriff's Department in October of 1993. It was in a plain, brown mailing package, no return address, postmarked from within the county. Deputy Sarah Mitchell, young and sharp, was on desk duty. She remembers the casual, almost bored click of the cassette player, the hiss of empty tape, and then the voice. It was calm, eerily, conversationally calm. A man's voice, mid-range, with a faint, unplaceable accent, maybe Midwestern, maybe not. He knew a name. Lindsay Marsh, the voice said, smooth as poured syrup. She's walking home from the library right now. She likes the path through Oakwood Park. She won't make it to the other side. Sarah froze. Lindsay Marsh was a real teenager, a sheriff's niece. They found her body 3 hours later in Oakwood Park, just like the voice said. That was the opening move. The killer, who we'd later call the county line caller, had established the rules. Sheriff Robert Clark, a bull of a man with 30 years under his belt, took it personally. This was his town. His people. The tapes kept coming, sometimes before a killing, sometimes after. Always that same chilling, calm narration. He'd describe what he'd done, or what he was about to do, in the detached tone of a man reading a grocery list. He knew details, what victims wore, what they'd said to friends, the brand of coffee they bought. It was intimate. It was a violation that went beyond murder. The task force grew. FBI behavioral analysts sketched a portrait. Organized, intelligent, likely in a position of perceived authority, or one that made him invisible. Maybe a utility worker, a mailman, a low-level clerk. He was local. He had to be. The break came in 1997. A partial fingerprint on a tape's plastic casing. A match in the system. Daniel Foster. A quiet, unassuming records clerk at Brookhaven University's administration building. He fit the profile perfectly. When they moved on his small apartment on the edge of town, he barricaded himself inside. There was a standoff, shouted negotiations that went nowhere. And then the single gunshot. Daniel Foster was dead by his own hand. Inside, the evidence seemed conclusive. Diagrams of victim routines, newspapers' clippings, and a voice recorder. Sheriff Clark held a press conference, his face grim but satisfied. The nightmare, he said, was over. The next tape arrived at the sheriff's home address 2 weeks later. The world just dropped out from under us. I was there, in the department, when the sheriff walked in that morning. He was gray. He looked older than I'd ever seen him. He didn't say a word, just placed a new cassette on the lead detective's desk. The voice was the same. Calm, familiar. "Hello, Robert," it said. "Bet you thought it was over." But the work continues. The room went ice cold. We had Foster's body. We had his prints on the earlier tape. The state forensic lab confirmed the recording equipment in his apartment could have been used. But this new tape, the postmark was from a town 50 miles away, dated after Foster's death. What followed was a silent, frantic panic. We couldn't tell the public. The fear, the relief that had settled over Brookhaven. To snatch that back? It was unthinkable. So a handful of us knew, and we tore the Foster case apart. Was he a copycat? A disciple? The analysts said no, the linguistic patterns, the vocal cadence, it was a statistical match. It was the same man. We interviewed everyone Foster knew. His coworkers described a quiet, competent man, a loner, but not strange. His landlord said he was a perfect tenant. No history of violence. No angry rants. Nothing that matched the cold, theatrical voice on the tapes. We found no evidence he'd ever been to the locations mentioned in the later calls. Theories fractured the task force. One camp believed Foster was the original caller, but he had a partner, someone who survived him and carried on the work. Another, more terrifying camp began to whisper, "What if we got the wrong man? What if the fingerprint was planted? What if the caller was one of us, someone inside the investigation, feeding on our desperation, watching us convict a dead man?" The calls became less frequent, but they never stopped. A year later, then two, always referencing things only the real killer would know. The sheriff, Clark. He retired, broken by it. He'd tell me over coffee, his hands never steady, "I looked that man in the eye through a rifle scope. I swear I did. But that voice is still out there. The official file is closed. Daniel Foster is the named perpetrator. The later tapes? Anomalies. Unexplained. Maybe hoaxes, though no hoaxer ever came forward, and the details were too perfect. I have a box of copies in my basement. Sometimes I listen, not to the words, but to the space around them. The quiet room he must have been in. I listen for a background sound, a distant train, a specific bird, a TV jingle that we all missed. I look at the faces of men I've worked with for 20 years and wonder. The caller won. Not because he wasn't caught, but because he proved the system was a sieve. He showed us that truth could be something you build around a lie, just to keep going. The voice is silent now. Or maybe it's just waiting. And the truly haunting question isn't who he was, but which version of the truth we chose to believe, just so we could sleep at night.